This episode of Boing Boing TV is brought to you by T-Mobile.
Well, hello there, and greetings from my office here in London, Cory Doctorow, I guess you might call it. I'm back from my book tour and settled in, and glad to be here. This is kind of my little secret lair. I got to rent it when we found out we were having a baby, because my old office is now the baby's room, so I have my own lair for the first time. Little brother, boy, the news just keeps getting better and better. Great review from William Gibson today, and New York Times 5 weeks in the bestseller list, maybe 6. I'll know later today. And actually, the folks at BBTV asked me to record this live blog for you, or video blog for you, and to read you a little bit more, Little Brother, which is what I'm about to do now. So this is a section from one of the early chapters. It's a scene right early on where the protagonist, guy named Marcus, and his pals, who've all snuck out of high school to play an alternate reality game, which is kind of a scavenger hunt for nerds. Not that other scavenger hunts aren't for nerds. I guess it's a scavenger hunt for a certain kind of 21st century nerd. The scavenger hunt, they've been out playing, and while they were playing it, the air raid sirens went off and said, get into shelters, and so they're in San Francisco. They're headed down to the Powell Street BART, along with a bunch of other people, and that's where the action all opens. We passed a lot of people in the road on the way to the Powell Street BART. They were running or walking, white-faced and silent, or shouting and panicked. Homeless people cowered in doorways and watched it all, while a tall black tranny hooker shouted at 2 mustached young men about something. The closer we got to the BART, the worse the press of bodies became. By the time we reached the stairway down into the station, it was a mob scene, a huge brawl of people trying to crowd their way down a narrow staircase. I had my face crushed up against someone's back, and someone else was pressed into my back. Daryl was still beside me. He was big enough that he was hard to shove, and Jolu was right behind him, kind of hanging on to his waist. I spied Vanessa a few yards away, trapped by more people. "Screw you!" I heard Van yell behind me. "Pervert, get your hands off me!" I strained around against the crowd and saw Van looking with disgust at an older guy in a nice suit who was kind of smirking at her. She was digging in her purse, and I knew what she was digging for. "Don't mace him!" I shouted over the din. "You'll get us all too!" At the mention of the word mace, the guy looked scared and kind of melted back, though the crowd kept him moving forward. Up ahead, I saw someone, a middle-aged lady in a hippie dress, falter and fall. She screamed as she went down, and I saw her thrashing to get up, but she couldn't. The crowd's pressure was too strong. As I neared her, I bent to help her up, and I was nearly knocked over. I ended up stepping on her stomach as the crowd pushed me past her, but by then, I don't think she was feeling anything. I was as scared as I'd ever been. There was screaming everywhere now, and more bodies on the floor, and the press from behind me was as relentless as a bulldozer. It was all I could do to keep on my feet. We were in the open concourse where the turnstiles were. It was hardly any better here. The enclosed space sent the voices around us echoing back in a roar that made my head ring, and the smell and feeling of all those bodies made me feel a claustrophobia I'd never known I was prone to. People were still cramming down the stairs, and more were squeezing past the turnstiles and down the escalators onto the platforms, but it was clear to me that this was not going to have a happy ending. "Want to take our chances up top?" I said to Daryl. "Yes, hell yes," he said. "This is vicious." I looked to Vanessa. There was no way she'd hear me. I managed to get my phone out, and I texted her. "We're getting out of here." I saw her feel the vibe from her phone, then look down at it and back at me and nod vigorously. Daryl, meanwhile, had clued Jolu in. "What's the plan?" Daryl shouted in my ear. "We're going to have to go back," I shouted back, pointing at the remorseless crush of bodies. "It's impossible," he said. "It's just going to get more impossible the longer we wait." He shrugged. Van worked her way over to me and grabbed hold of my wrist. I took Daryl, and Daryl took Jolu by the other hand, and we pushed out. It wasn't easy. We moved about 3 inches a minute at first, then slowed down even more when we reached the stairway. The people we passed were none too happy about us shoving them out of the way either. A couple people swore at us, and there was a guy who looked like he'd have punched me if he'd been able to get his arms loose. We passed 3 more crushed people beneath us, but there was no way I could have helped them. By that point, I wasn't even thinking of helping anyone. All I could think of was finding the spaces in front of us to move into, of Daryl's mighty straining at my wrist, of my death grip on Van behind me.
I'm a couch surfer. 37 cities in 55 weeks. I've got a lot of friends, no itinerary. Without my phone, I'd be out of luck. Most cell companies promise great coverage, but T-Mobile proved it to me on their website before I signed up. You can even see your signal strength, street by street. Or, in my case, couch by couch. When it comes to my coverage, T-Mobile works great.
Let T-Mobile prove your signal strength in all the places that matter to you.